Welcome back to the 99, where we're focused on brewing a better competitive commander. I'm your host, Patrick Marlett, and this is our Hidden Gems series, where I discuss all the unsung heroes in the commander format, namely today, multicolored spells. And if there are any cards that you feel are underutilized or underplayed in commander, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you guys are playing. But today I have 6 cards, plus an additional bonus, a 7th one I'd love to discuss with all of you, so stay tuned to the end of this video to hear my opinions on all these multicolored cards. Now, before I jump into this video, I want you all to know that if you enjoy this content regularly and want to help out, the best way to do so is with your pledge via Patreon. Your pledge there goes miles into helping the production costs here, and it comes coupled with a few perks. So feel free to check all those out in the link in the description. And if you want to help support the channel indirectly, if you are interested in picking up any of the cards I mentioned today, the best way to do so and help the channel is with the link in the description through TCG Player. A small portion of the proceeds will go to help out the 99, and I thank you for that. If you use it, it costs you nothing extra, but again, goes a long way in helping the production cost here. So thank you for doing that. And along with every month, there's a monthly topic to discuss. And this month's topic for the month of February is, what is your favorite deck list and how does it play? Whether it be casual or competitive, so long as you enjoy playing that list, that's all that matters. And of course, stay tuned to the end of this video to hear the thoughts of one of our Brew Crew members on this very topic. Now, I want to start off this Hidden Gems video by talking about a command spell. Now, it's not one of the new ones from Strixhaven. None of those are hidden gems. However, back in Dragons of Tarkir, there was a series of command spells from that set. If I'm not mistaken, they were all instant speed, by the way. But one of my favorites, and this is really setting the bar. All of those really set the bar for what a command spell can be. But Kolaghan's Command, for one generic black, red, so we're in Rakdos, instant speed, choose 2. So just like the Strixhaven command spells, these are all modal. They let you pick 2 modes at a time. Now the trick with the ones we were reading off last week, if you haven't seen that video, I encourage you to check it out, is that with these modal spells, when they let you choose 2, obviously the CMC is usually up there in cost because of the kind of value you're getting from it. However, not all the modes are usable at one time, right? Sometimes you'll be picking suboptimal modes just to get this card to go on the stack. However, with Kolaghan's Command, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Not always playable, but in a lot of instances, extremely playable, particularly if you're in Rakdos. There's plenty of things that are getting removed from the board that you want back. Namely, in Rakdos specifically, the big targets are going to be a Dark Confidant that was removed, a Dockside Extortionist, right? Like you're aiming to animate it, but someone has some sort of grave hate, you can pull it back to your hand. Again, Kolaghan's is instant speed. So any way you want to recover a creature, this is fantastic recovery in these colors. Of course, if you expand which list this is in, it's extremely playable. So I wouldn't say that this is one of 4 modes that's always playable. However, these other 3, target player discards a card. They get to choose, but this is fantastic disruption. Either way, like you don't need to, when you're placing this on the stack, you don't feel bad if that's just the second mode you have to select because none of these other ones are very valuable. However, it's still fantastic disruption to just, interact with someone's hand when they're, they have to get rid of their land per turn, or usually in a cEDH setting, people will mulligan down to the perfect hand, right? And if you can get to them with this while they have like 3 cards in hand, then they're going to make a suboptimal discarder and or not want to have to deal with this. Now, it's no Hymn to Turok, right? It's not randomized, but it's still fantastic disruption. So like 1 for 4, I find that extremely playable. Destroy target artifact at 3 CMC, yeah, extremely playable. You're always going to want to do that. And lastly, Kolaghan's Command, I'll read the errata text here. It deals 2 damage to any target. So, like baseline, this is an Abrade, but you get to choose both modes, right? Mind you, Abrade is 3 damage over the Shock, which is 2 damage here. But for the most part, that's going to hit a lot of your targets in a, competitive commander setting. Most hate bearers have 2 defense still. There's only a handful I can think of where the defense goes over 2 that you'd want to remove from the board, namely Drannith Magistrate. Like that's the big hate bear that has a larger butt. But 2 damage is normally going to hit everything, and then you can also pop an artifact with this spell. And or you can also make someone discard, and or you can also recover your own hate bear and or creature from your graveyard. All of these effects are extremely playable, and that was the issue with the modern command spells from Strixhaven. Not all of those modes are playable at any given point in time, so you don't want to cast the command spell and feel like you're playing it suboptimally, or Kolaghan's Command for 3 CMC at instant speed, whenever I cast this, I feel like a majority of these modes are going to be playable, and they're all extremely good, right? Even just using that 4th mode to kill someone's Tymna while you hit someone else's Mana Rock is a big deal, right? Like, this is... all of these modes are extremely playable is what I'm getting at. I'd say 3 for 4 are always playable. The first mode, returning a thing to your hand, not always going to be playable, just depends on your strategy. This is a fantastic knockout, you know, standard setting command spell. Like, this is where the bar is, and this is what other command spells should look like. Kolaghan's command is fantastic. There's also Atarka's, Ojutai's, I'm gonna forget all the dragon names, but there's a handful more command spells from the set you should definitely check out. We're not gonna discuss all of them today. Just want to discuss my favorite. Speaking of dragons, now I'm pretty sure I've talked about this card on the channel multiple times. I don't remember which videos. It might have even been in gameplay videos, but Fire Covenant, whew, I'm gonna read the errata text. I'm gonna read it over and I'm gonna explain why you should own a copy. For a generic and Rakdos again, instant speed, as an additional cost to cast a spell, pay X life. So that happens before anyone else receives priority to include yourself, right? So you can, this is instant speed, so you can do something else after this. People can counter this and then you just lost life. That would kind of suck. But Fire Covenant deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. This is some of the best removal in the game. This is some of the absolute best removal in the game. Like, I value this so much more highly than Toxic Deluge. I know people really get giddy over Deluge. Yeah, it gets past Indestructible. Whose creature has Indestructible? What deck are you going against where the creatures have Indestructible that you're concerned about, right? Is there really like an Avacyn list that's just like trouncing you? Well, then maybe yes, you know, Fire Covenant's not going to be as good as Toxic Deluge, but the fact that this is instant speed means I can hold my resources to leverage anything else in my hand at this point, right? If I don't need to do Fire Covenant, I can also do my Vampiric Tutor off turn, my Entomb off turn, my Abrade off turn, my Kolaghan's Command off turn, right? The flexibility of this being instant speed puts us so much higher than any other removal spell, namely Toxic Deluge, because it's the other mass board wipe you see in cEDH. However, with this, I could selectively pick out what I want to remove. Where Deluge is every creature receives -X for paying X amount of life, I can say, no, I just want to kill your commander, that Dark Confidant, what other value pieces there might be, and maybe that Aethersworn Canonist, and I pay 12 life for that. Yes, that is a lot of life consumption for one piece of removal, but if you're falling behind and or need to catch up, this is the way to do it. You know, mind you, we're in a world where Peer into the Abyss is now in effect in your blacklist. So if your life total goes down to 20 or 18 at this point in the game, you likely have the mana requisite to cast a Peer into the Abyss anyway. So even if you're off of the ad nauseum package, you still have options. It's not like you're stuck in a rut because, oh no, I had to use 12 life for a Fire Covenant, when you're really taking the entire board down a lot of pegs, and you get to avoid removing any of your own creatures in the same occasion. It's fantastic. This card ranges from like $4 to $6 depending on where you get it, the condition of it, and it's non-reserved. I want to state that first and foremost, but it's only received one printing from Ice Age, and it's fantastic removal. If you do not own a copy or you do not play this card, and you are in Rakdos, and or extend that beyond, like if you're in Grixis, whatever colors you're in, you should be playing a copy of Fire Covenant. Own a copy of Fire Covenant. It's fantastic. It's one of the best pieces of removal. And yes, if you add Naws and you hit this for 3 damage, it's worth it. Trust me, it's totally worth it. My favorite piece of removal in Commander, bar none. The best for creatures. Next card I want to talk about is Growth Spiral. I'm going to read it off first, and then it's going to sound very familiar to another card. However, this is better, and you should be utilizing it. If you are in Simic, so this is green and blue, instant speed. I'll instance today. Oops, I'll instance, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. No, there's some non-instance in here. Draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this doesn't bar you from what type of land. It can be basic, non-basic. It comes into play untapped, right? Unless there's something that's making your lands tap, like an opposing root maze or your own root maze. This sounds exactly like Explore, right? This is essentially an instant speed Explore. Explore, if I'm not mistaken, reads you can play an additional land this turn, draw a card. Why this is better is because, and why I think these types of effects are underutilized. This is such good ramp. If you're able to leverage, and it's really barred to just a handful of cards. There aren't that many 2CMC and under cards that effectively let you play additional lands a turn, but this is one of the better ones. Because lands, for the most part, are generally protected in a cEDH setting. There aren't that many people running Armageddon or Ravages of War or mass land destruction at all, let alone any sort of strip mine strategies. It's just really unseen, whether that be the social contract for your local play group or what. I never see it that often. So, putting this down as opposed to like a mana vault is generally safer, because someone will zap your mana vault, or it might just die due to consequence, like someone cast a meltdown. However, when you put a land onto the battlefield, it's generally safe. So it's the safest form of ramp, in my earnest opinion, and it also replaces itself. However, unlike Explore, this is instant speed. So, and you're in blue, so you want to hold up your interaction. You want to have, maybe you just want to play some sort of card quality cantrip instead. You can still do that. You find your land, and then you can go for Growth Spiral, getting that ramp to lead into your next turn. This is just phenomenal value. The fact it replaces itself, the fact it can be done at instant speed. There's really not too much else to say about this other than it's a card you should be utilizing if you're in Simic. Obviously, the top deck draw is also valuable for just hitting your top deck tutors in a situation where you need to hit your top deck tutors, right? Speaking of ad nauseum, there are a ton of situations where you go and make that big draw and you have like 30 cards in your hand and you're just missing one element of a winning strategy or one element of your combo, and the only tutors you have are like an Imperial Seal and or any other top deck tutor. In this situation, you are Simic, we're talking about a black card, but it could be Sylvan Tutor, whatever, like your 2-card creature combo. You can use this to go into that top deck tutor and also ramp yourself out with that huge ass hand. That's fantastic. Like, you're giving yourself the additional mana you need to do the thing while also acquiring the thing. It doesn't really get better in my opinion. Growth Spiral being one of the best put land to field cards in the game, particularly at uncommon. I don't know why this one isn't played more. And I'm gonna do a shout out to the cEDH TV crew. Mons, like, he plays Growth Spiral. I've seen him play it a ton of times. It always gives him fantastic value. So take a hint from him. Take a hint from Mons. Play Growth Spiral. It's a good card. Now, this is a little bit of a pet card for me. You do need to be in Mardu to use it, but I do want to note some interesting interactions for it, despite me never going for that line of play, and also just how valuable this card is on face value. We have Hide and Seek. Hide for Boros, Seek for Orzhov. Hide reads at instant speed. Put target artifact or enchantment on the bottom of its owner's library. Now, we'll stop and talk about Hide first before I jump into Seek. These are both very mechanically interesting effects, and they both have different ways of interacting with your opponents. Hide, for instance, has a way of protecting your own artifacts and enchantments. If you need to put it at the bottom of your library and find it back later, that's okay. But for the most part, Hide is going to be leveraged as a form of removal. And in instances where someone's going for their Underworld Breach line of play, this is a good way to just get rid of the Underworld Breach from the battlefield. Obviously, they're going to have access to their graveyard if it lands, so hopefully you can insert this, and I'll tell you a way you can cheat this out to where it's going to be very hard to interact with. But using Hide on someone's winning artifact or enchantment is a fantastic way of eliminating the threat. It's just a good card to have on top of Seek. So search target opponent's library for a card and remove that card from the game. You gain life equal to its converted mana cost. Then that player shuffles his or her library. You don't need the life gain. That's just icing on top of this cake. However, if you know what your opponent is going for when they're attempting a win, like if you've just seen like this colored list play, you've seen this deck played several times over, it's very easy to grab the card you know they're going for, right? Worst case scenario, like you take their, speaking of Underworld Breach, you take their Underworld Breach, whatever, right? This is before they go to Intuition, right? You take their Underworld Breach and I suppose they can grab their Praetor's Grasp, but no one's gonna give them Praetor's Grasp. Seeking against the Intuition is a great idea, by the way. But basically what I'm saying is you remove the threat before it ever becomes one. And you're doing this for 2 mana at instant speed. this is phenomenal value, the targeted removal from someone's deck, because the whole range of options is like 80 plus cards or however many cards they have on their list at this point. It's usually be narrowed down to whatever solutions they're going to use for a win. Now, what's unique about hide and seek is that both effects are instant speed, and you happen to be in Mardu, which means we do have access to Sunforger. And if you're wondering, yes, Sunforger will let you find this card and cast it from your deck. So if you want to interact with Underworld Breach when it's on the battlefield, like someone's going for a win, you can Sunforge Hide and just say, and again, this is amongst a number of removal that you might be running, but this is just a great way to go ahead and get Hide and or Seek and say, nah, you can put that at the bottom of your list, or nah, I'm going to find that solution instead. Your brain freeze? Sure, let's get rid of that. Now, this may or may not stop your opponent, but it is an option in those instances. Underworld Breach is very difficult to interact with and successfully stop once it's resolved, but you get the idea here. This is a multi-utility knife that's fantastic in a ton of different situations, and certainly unsung in the world of Commander. I rarely see hide and seek played. If I have a list in Mardu, it's something I like to go for and often. And if you're looking at this card in a Mardu list and or more, obviously you might be utilizing ad nauseum. You don't want too many cards that are 3 CMC and over, but this is one that's worth slotting in the list, trust me. It's very diverse in its effect. Obviously, you want Hide to do the removal instead, but you're not always going to get everything you want. I mean, if it was removal, I think this card should be more CMC-wise. But, moving on. This is one of my favorite cards for Selesnya, and I slotted it into almost every list. Sterling Grove. So for green-white enchantment, other enchantments you control have Shroud. You can pay 1, sacrifice Sterling Grove, search your library for an enchantment card and reveal that card. Shuffle your library, then put that card on top. Now, it's funny because I slot this into a lot of lists that include green-white, and your mind goes towards like, well, what am I going to functionally put in my list that this wants to grab, right? You don't need game-winning enchantments for this to be good. It could really just grab your Sylvan Library, and you're good. It can grab your Survival of the Fittest, and you're really good, right? A tutor for a tutor. That sounds really good. And you get to do all of this at instant speed, right? Because it's not limited in its casting time. Unlike Wishclaw Talisman, right? Which is sort of the counter to this. Mind you, Wishclaw Talisman, same mana cost to do all the things, but it can only be done on your turn, and you give that card to someone else, but you do get to search anything. So it feels like a better option. However, Sterling Grove, I mean, it's negligible, but the other enchantments have Shroud is a big deal. Like, your opponent's not being able to interact with your enchantments is a huge deal, particularly if you're in these colors and utilize Rule of Law effects. Well, as soon as someone goes to remove your Sterling Grove because they need to remove your Rule of Law effect, you could just use it as a tutor. You could just pop it and say, okay, now I'm going to find a different solution, which is fantastic value. When this came out, it was uncommon, and it hadn't seen a reprint till a recent Judge promo. Which is also kind of expensive. This is going to be one of the more expensive cards I believe I'll discuss today. They range from like $10 to $30, pending whether you get the Invasion copy and or the Judge promo, but whichever one, it is totally worth owning this card, whether you slot it into a list immediately. It's one of my favorite cards to utilize. I happen to have a foil Invasion that I am always happy to utilize, although I gotta say the Seb McKinnon Sterling Grove is very tempting as well. But guys, if you don't own Sterling Grove, you should definitely own it. You don't, again, need to get a game-winning enchantment for this to be good. It's just good by itself. So, I've actually said on the channel before that counter magic is easily the best form of interaction, particularly in Commander. It decides and makes and breaks a lot of games. However, I'm going to amend that statement. Because the more I play with these effects, the more I earnestly feel that redirects are the best form of interaction in Commander. Namely, we have Swerve today. So for Is It, blue, red, instant speed, change a target spell with a single target. So, and unlike Deflecting Swat, which is everyone's go-to now, which lets you redirect abilities, which is a huge boon to that card. It's why it's so good, and interesting why it's only 3 CMC, because the scope of that effect in my mind is better than Deadly Rollick, and Deadly Rollick's 4 CMC to exile a target creature, where Deflecting Swat is 3 by itself, which is still very easy to cast, 2 generic and 1 red, Swerve in this instance is a little bit more limited in what it can do. However, it's a redirect without any sort of downside, right? Or any sort of hiccup. It's not like a Ricochet Trap or a Bold Bend or Imp's Mischief. It's blue, so it's just going to do the thing without any sort of fault. Change target of target spell with a single target. So baseline, what can this do? And why are you saying redirects are better than counters? Well, there are some counters that are value added, right? So we can look at the Mana Drains of the world, we can look at the Flusterstorms of the world. Obviously, those are very, very good counters, right? Mana Drain letting you ramp on your turn, obviously Flusterstorm having Storm on it. This, by and large, and redirects by and large, are better in my opinion because they do more than just counter spells on the stack. And yes, you can counter spells on the stack with this. So baseline, this is going to be your Dispel Fizzles, because I can make Dispel target Swerve. Any redirect, you can make the spell target itself. It sounds crazy. Go ahead and read the ruling on Swerve, though. I'm fairly certain it even says it in Swerve, but any sort of redirect spell, you can redirect the target so long as it's a valid target to itself, and Dispel is counter target instant. So baseline, you're going to do that. But in any other scenario, I can say, nah, your Braid is going to do 3 damage to this target instead. No, your Peer into the Abyss is going to target me instead. No, your Force of Will is going to target Swerve instead. The number of targets that you can redirect is so much more so than a counter removing a threat from the stack. Because if I can make your value my value, it's even better than just saying your Dispel Fizzles, right? So not only is this good in a counter war, is what I'm getting at, it's also good at making plays for yourself, right? Particularly when those threats are coming at you, right? So say someone casts that Abrade or Mock Salvage or whatever onto your board state, you can say, no, I'd rather you just remove, you know, your Smothering Tithe or whatever sort of value piece they might have had out. Smothering Tithe, you're seeing less and less often these days, but you get the concept here. So long as that, you know, Mock Salvage Abrade would not be able to target Smothering Tithe, by the way, mind you. It would need to be like a Nature's Claim or something that could hit an enchantment. However, Swerve is going to let you handle or redirect any of these scenarios from happening. It's fantastic. Again, functionally a counter spell, but then a counter spell plus whatever the hell else you want it to be. So provided there's a target for the spell being cast, which is phenomenal. That's a value. It's like having the Mana Drain being value added. Redirects are like a value added counter spell all the time, in my mind. Swerve is one of those cards that's never played. And there's many of redirect in blue alone that's just never played. But I absolutely love all of them. Let me know if you guys use Divert or any of the redirects that just happen to be in blue. I find those effects extremely valuable, and they should be played more, to include Swerve. Hope I got my thoughts out there clearly, but I absolutely love redirects. Playing the list that you might have seen in the recent Brew Wars, the list I showcased on the channel, Ragnarok and Devesh, you're so limited on ways to interact with the stack that you have to find new ways to, you know, get your combos to go off effectively. So I wound up manipulating every redirect I could, and the more I play them, the more I realized that these are just damned good cards. A step up above counters, and you can fight me on that, but I find redirects to be more valuable than counters in most situations. Lastly, the final card I want to talk about, and this is the bonus card. You're not going to see it in every list. You're not going to want it in every list. But Dryad Militant, another Selesnya card. So it's either green or white, so it's 1 mana value. Creature, Dryad, Soldier, 2/1 body. If an instant or sorcery card would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So, why would you play this? This is almost like playing Samurai of the Pale Curtain. Same replacement effect, but for permanence. It's like Rest in Peace, although Rest in Peace is slightly value added, because when Rest in Peace lands, you just exile all the graves, coupled with anything going into the graves from then on out is exiled. So why is this good? There is such an influx of instants and sorceries in the cEDH list you see played. A majority of most lists are going to be instants and sorceries and not permanents. So the fact that if you can get this down on turn 1, you are stopping people from effectively building up their breach line, right? Because you need cards in your grave to do the thing. And or anytime there's a wheel, you're removing value from their graves, provided you don't need your grave for any reason, right? Obviously, you're in Selesnya, your strategy is probably going to be built around permanents anyways. You're going to be fine with this. So In much the same way that a Serra Ascendant is valuable to lists that want life gain, right? You see Serra Ascendant pop up in a lot of cEDH lists. If you don't know what that is, it should be on the screen now, but I'll paraphrase. If your life total's 30 or more, Serra Ascendant gets buffed and gains lifelink and flying. Basically, you gain like 6 life every time you swing. Really cool deal. But it's only really valuable if you land it in those early turns. Otherwise, it's sort of a dead card. Same issue here with Dryad Militant. You really want it on the board early to start removing cards from graveyards soon, because again, it's not like Rest in Peace. It's just not going to do it when it lands. However, it does it, and it's a 2/1 body, right? So if you get this down early, this is fantastic. If it's you got a partner paired Tymna list, this is just another body that can be swinging, right? And on curve for your Tymna, right? You laid down a rock, you laid down Dryad Militant, you're already laying on the stacks package. And it's so negligible effect that people aren't really going to target this card because they're not altogether too concerned that their Snapcaster loses, a little bit of value. But for those strategies that do care about how many cards they can escape from their graveyard, this is going to be so painful to them. Like when they brain freeze, like how many cards are they really filtering into their, their graveyard at this point? Obviously, if the brain freeze storm count is like 8, then they should hopefully be good, right? There's enough lands in your list to fill up that grave, right? You got a couple of permanents in there. But I do find this card to be extremely underutilized, particularly when you take into account that there are ways to recover cards from your graveyards, like Noxious Revival, Eternal Witness. Like these are effects that are going to essentially put a counter spell back in someone's hand and or some value piece back in someone's hand. And if that value piece happens to be instant or sorcery, you're just removing that option from the table. And I think that's really fantastic, coupled with the fact that it's just a body, right? So if it does lose its effectiveness or its resourcefulness, you can just Diabolic Intent this. This could just be the thing you discard to Survival of the Fittest, and that's also okay. But what's also nice about this is if you really want to land it early and you know that removing instants and sorceries are good from your opponents, then you can Green Sun Zenith this. Like any green tutor is going to find this because she happens to be green as well. So Dryad Militant, definitely up there among my favorite stacks pieces that are underutilized. And sadly, I doubt she'll still see play even after this video, despite her being of value in my opinion. It really just depends on your meta. But that will cover all the cards today for multicolored spells that I find to be hidden gems. I think Swerve, any redirect that you don't see played, start playing them. You should definitely leverage all the redirects. Fire Covenant, if you don't own a copy, own a copy. It's totally worth just destroying the board. All the cards today have excellent use cases, and I think you should definitely check some of them out. Now, as I do with every video, there's a random shout out to one lucky Patreon member, and today's Patreon member getting the shout out is Gunblade Knight. Gunblade is a longtime supporter of the channel and current Brew Crew member. Thank you for your support here, Gunblade. It is much appreciated. You are among the best. And for his thoughts on the monthly topic, I'll be reading for Rodrigo Avia. Yuriko is definitely my favorite list. It has lots of creatures that can counter spells, including a few honorary ninjas for combat triggers. Some of the best mana rocks, counter spells, and tutors to pull off the Oracle Demonic Consultation winning combo. Combat damage with triggers is so satisfying, especially when it refills my hand and hurts all of my opponents simultaneously. And that will do it for this video. Was there a card I mentioned today that you hadn't heard of and or seen in Commander? I'd love to know in the comment section down below, along with any multicolored cards that you find to be hidden gems. Again, my name is Patrick Marlette, and happy brewing, babies!